Good evening. I was originally going to wait for Michael Maresco, the town administrator. He's tied up at the moment, so I'm sure he'll be in a few minutes. Unfortunately, tonight we have an hour because we have the Conservation Commission coming in for their hearings. I was going to go through some slides briefly, and then we'll take comments and questions. Any additional comments and questions that you have after the fact, you can email either Greg Guimond, or Karen Horn. We're the planning department. The planning board public hearing will be sometime in early March, which is required for any zoning changes. There'll probably be a couple of additional other corrections for articles, but they're more technical in nature. Those will be focused around the housing partnership is no longer the housing partnership, it is the housing trust. So we have to change the references in the bylaws, and there's some references to the housing authority that have to be changed as well. But those are not like, most people wouldn't be concerned with those type of changes, so I was not going to go into those tonight. So tonight I was going to focus in on the MBTA community zoning change, which is the bigger of the two changes, and then talk on the accessory apartments. We do have a couple of copies of the bylaws here. We do have the barcodes so you can get them. There's also links online. I see more people coming. With that, I'll try to get through this very quickly. So the first thing I'm showing you on the screen is the actual change to the state law. It is fairly short, but it is supported by state guidelines, which are much lengthier. The highlights of that are we have to have a zoning ordinance or bylaw that provides at least one district which allows multifamily housing by right. And that district should have a minimum density of 15 units per acre. It could be higher. It should be located not more than a half mile to a commuter rail station, subway station, ferry terminal, or a bus station. We are not, but we are considered adjacent community, which is in their guidelines, not in the state law. The housing can have age restriction, and it should be suitable for families with children. And then originally there was no requirement for affordable housing units. And Marshfield and other communities quickly pointed that out to the state, that actually hurts us, especially when we will have achieved 10%, only to have it knocked back down by this type of language without at least 10% so we stay balanced. So they did change their guidelines to reflect that. What is the catch at the moment? The catch at the moment, originally it was 3 discretionary funds. The state has included 10 more. So there are 13 different discretionary funds that the state could withhold if we do not make this zoning change. The 3 on the bottom are the most likely: land use planning grants, local acquisition, or the MVP. We are an MVP community, and we had a long-term resiliency plan done through MVP funds. Otherwise, we have not used any of these state funds as of or to date. Here's the guidelines, or an older copy of the guidelines, and as I mentioned, we are an adjacent community, so they want us to provide 10% of our total housing stock, which in our case comes out to 1,185 units are expected by the state. They also had a detailed mapping and requirements and stuff. Karen, fortunately, is GIS, much more handy at GIS than I am. We've been able to do all our own mapping, et cetera. We did not need state assistance to do that. We ran all the different calculations. We followed their guidelines. They wanted half mile to the station, along transit routes, walking distance to stores and services in villages or downtowns, or along commercially zoned areas. They wanted us to avoid excluded lands and sensitive lands. And when we ran it the first time, we did not come up with an area that had the minimum suitable 50-acre size that they were looking for. So, having to come up with a district, we redid it, and the main difference is that instead of excluding sensitive lands, we tried to avoid sensitive lands. So these are the routes, these are the things that Karen and I looked at when we came back to, all right, we've got to try to find an area somewhere. And it was the sensitive area one that was the threshold that made the difference. So the area that we're talking about is from School Street along the north side of 139 to direct Branning. That's the high school, and the middle school's over here. That's the area that we're proposing for the MBTA zone. It is in an aquifer protection district. That's the sensitive area that this triggers. So there's an air photo of the existing area. It has no excluded lands in it. As I mentioned, it is in the Furnace Brook and Union Street Wells Zone 2. That would trigger a packaged treatment plant for a large development facility in this area. It has the 84 acres, or well, it has our minimum area requirement came out to be 77 acres. So we have 84 that we're proposing, and we're roughly exceeding the number that's required by the state by 90 units. So at the moment, the state expects adjacent communities to have the zoning changes in place by next New Year's Eve. We are on schedule to go to April town meeting, unless at the public hearing it just gets ripped apart or something, and then we have the opportunity for a fall town meeting. So we purposely schedule it for the April town meeting so we have the ability, if things go badly, to try again prior to the deadline passing. And the final thing to note is the state also changed the minimum zoning act change requirements when it's pro-housing to be a simple majority versus a 2/3 vote. So in the past, we had to get 2/3 votes, which is not easy to get for all zoning changes. And it's still, all the rest of the zoning changes still require the 2/3%. That's the quick one on the on the MBTA communities. This is the short version of the changes on the accessory apartments as what we've prepared. We've added a definition of accessory apartments because after reviewing it, we realized, hey, we don't even have a definition. We've changed the accessory apartments within single-family homes from a special permit to a by right with site plan review. We're allowing accessory apartments in accessory buildings by special permit. We're allowing accessory apartments for pre-existing non-conforming lots that meet the minimum lot size and conform to the setbacks, also by right with site plan review. We're going back to the 2 bedrooms in the accessory apartments, and site plan review for accessory apartments within single-family homes would be during a regular planning board meeting as a regular agenda item. So it does not require a public hearing. It's you submit the application, you file your site plan, et cetera, and it gets taken up at the next planning board meeting. So that's kind of the quick summary of the 2 zoning changes that we are considering bringing to this town meeting in April. That's it on my side. We are now open for questions or comments.
I have a question about your accessory dwelling. I know that you had presented a draft a few town meetings ago, and there was no site plan review. It was bring it to the building inspector and save the cost and expense of going to the planning board hearing.
So it is not a planning board hearing. It is, you submit your site plan, you submit your information. We are constantly asked by the state, and we do not have good information on how many accessory apartments are in the town. So we've kept it as a process that here's your application, it's considered by right. The planning board could add a condition to it, but cannot deny it.
So why can't that be done at the building inspector level?
It could be done by the building inspector if he so chose. He and I had a conversation, and he's fine with now the responsibility of all the paperwork and tracking of all the permits would be under the planning board's purview,
He being our current
our current
building
building
inspector.
commissioner. So the main change was we were going to allow accessory apartments within a building, within an existing home by right. That was we were trying a simple change.
Yeah.
We had some comments, and after we looked at it, we were like, we got to rewrite this whole thing because it's not set up that way. So one of the changes that I did not highlight is we're changing it from the special permit section of the bylaw to special regulations, the next section up, 12. So it's in a different location, so we have the ability to do by right for the ones within the existing built houses, and then we have the right to, or ability to have the special permit for accessory units within an accessory dwelling. So we're trying to do two different things, because one of the comments was, last time was people, oh, well, I want an accessory apartment and an accessory building as well. So that's why we set it up this
And-
way.
Okay, so if people were asking for that, how did we land on the language that it's within and not detached? Why is that not an option to have a detached ancillary?
It does allow for a detached, an accessory apartment within an accessory building is allowed through a special permit,
Through the planning board.
through the planning board.
What if there isn't an accessory building there, however they want to create an accessory
Same-
unit?
Same thing.
Can we see
Accessory
that?
unit in a new accessory building would be part of the special permit.
So you can build a new accessory dwelling.
You could build a new accessory building with an accessory unit in it, yes, so long as you met the criteria.
And it's approved by planning board.
That would be an approval versus a by right.
And what will the criteria be for that
It's,
special
the
permit?
criteria's all, which we did send you a link, I believe, for the. So there is criteria for the site plan version and for the special permit.
So Greg, with the ability, Carol, with the ability to build a new accessory dwelling, the 2-year waiting period is.
No 2-year waiting period, that was removed
Oh,
previously.
that was removed, excuse me.
That had already been removed.
Just a
So,
little bit behind.
again, we're taking small steps as we adjust. The state is still reviewing the accessory apartments on the state level for changes to state laws. So I suspect a year or two from now, we will probably be coming back and further tinkering this to match or comply with any state changes in addition to what we're changing at this moment. So this does not address everything that anybody could possibly want, but we're trying to take care of the two items that we had heard, was accessory apartments within a building by right and accessory apartments within an accessory building. We're proposing it as a special permit at this point. And we have a number of other communities that we've looked at their bylaws and stuff, and they do have it broken out. Hingham and some of the other towns have similar language. And again, depending on what the state does, we will probably be changing this again in the future. Hi.
Hi. How many units do you think this will create? And will that grandfather in existing units that you might not have hard data on existing? And also, will there be regulations about these units not being used for short-term rentals, like Airbnb?
Okay, so the first one is, we do not have good numbers on the accessory apartments, which is why we still want to have the site plan review, so we can actually get a site plan, we can get the building commission, the building department in to make sure it's up to code, et cetera. That was question number one. Question number two, sorry.
Grandfather in existing.
We do not have a blanket grandfathering thing. If people you have an existing one and you meet the criteria, you come in under a regular board meeting and you get your, your approval that way. And it's an accessory building, the same thing. And like some of the main things that we're looking at is proper setbacks. So we don't have buildings right on top of other houses, et cetera. It still has the same lot requirements. However, we did bump up the 1 acre to a full 1 acre. We had it at 40,000, but we kept it as minimum lot requirements for now. Again, if you have an undersized lot, like area-wise, you would go to the Board of Appeals for remedy there possibly. We did not include that as part of these changes.
And the last one was the short-term rentals.
We put in short-term rental. There is a thing on short-term rentals, I gotta.
Yeah, I just have 30 days, right?
30 days. So the rental minimum is 30 days. So you're not having every week somebody else coming in. Again, because we figured there would be concerns on that part, especially in the smaller lot areas of town.
I got a couple of questions on the development down there. Does the 1,185 number include the proposed apartments that they're going to be building by us, the 250 units?
No.
What happens then?
So the question was, do the Modera units, the 40B that has been approved but not built yet, do they count towards the MBTA? The answer is no. They still get built, so we still have those.
In that, but what happens to that 1,185 unit number? Does that, once those apartments are built, does that number increase that we need to fill this MBTA slot? In other words, does it go up by 10%, which would be another 25 units?
So 10 years from now, when the next census comes out, it would go up by the 10% because we're now covered until the next census. However, we put in a clause, or the state has allowed us, and we have in our language, trying to look for the right slide. We're having 10% of those units affordable, so those units, when they come in, will stay even on our total count. One of the other things I had not mentioned is we have 3 40Bs that have been approved but not constructed. We're expecting Modera to start construction shortly. We have Ferry Street in back for a reissuance of the permit with a higher density. And we have a property on the Duxbury town line that was also approved years ago. Those 3 projects together will get us over our 10% until the next census. But in addition, Karen being good at GIS, we've finally gotten a GLAM number, which is, what is GLAM stand for? General Land Area Mapping minimum, which is another requirement under 40B. So either you have your 10% or you have your GLAM. We are very close to that GLAM number, and I believe with those 3 40Bs and a couple of more acquisitions on open space, we will have reached the GLAM, which then means that the town of Marshfield will not have to worry about every 10 years, every census, falling back below the 10% threshold.
Greg, I think he means will that district need to be made bigger? And I don't
No,
think, no.
no. So this district does not have to change with the 40B. Oh, I took it the reverse way, sorry. I took your question the reverse way. I took it as, do we have to have more 40B unit, or whatever? Then no, we'll be okay.
On this proposed area, is it still limited to 4 stories high?
Yes, the proposal is 4 stories high. For other people that may not have been in earlier conversations, the state actually kind of was looking for 5, 6 stories. Our discussions were we did not want to go to town meeting proposing 5 or 6 stories. We did not see that going over well. We do have a couple of 4-story buildings, so we stayed with the state guidelines. You kind of have to, parking requirements, all the different requirements are factored into their calculations. And you have to meet an average of 15 units per acre. Our proposal's actually at 16 units per acre in order for us to get to the 15.1, so we're above that 15 threshold. And by playing with the number of stories, or playing with the area requirements, or playing with the parking requirements, that thing shifts a lot. So having Karen being able to do the mapping and figuring out all the different requirements was extremely helpful. So what we're proposing is a 4-story at the same density or the same lot areas as the B2 that's existing.
I think Braintree has something similar, if not the same, with the 4-story, but the developers up there are saying that they need 6 to make money. Once this if this gets approved, and they decide they need more stories, do they have to go back to the planning board, or how does that work?
So if our language says 4,
Yep.
I believe they would have to go to the Board of Appeals for a variance to go to 6.
Okay.
I'm not sure about that one, but that would be my assumption. We have followed, especially because once this is all said and done, the state reviews it and then says, oh, yes, Marshfield's done it, or Marshfield, no, you need to go back to the drawing board. So if they have said yes to it, our town meeting has said yes to it, it is in our zoning bylaw, the way to get around that 4 stories, I believe, would be to the ZBA as a variance.
We're talking about the change in the 2/3 vote for the zoning.
Yep.
Does that affect the affordable village by us?
If you were to change the affordable village, yes, it would affect, it would be,
First of all, we're not gonna change.
no. But if there was a change to the affordable village,
So there would be somebody that comes in that wants to develop it, and saying there's not enough housing in there for them to make money. They would have to go to
town meeting,
town meeting.
but it would be a simple majority vote for that change, I believe.
And I know.
I'm not always happy with some of the things the state does, but
My last question is, does the fire and police have enough staffing to cover all of this?
I won't ask a fire chief if he happened to be in the room.
Well, I would too, but I figured I'd ask you so you can ask me.
If we have a higher population, we will probably need additional fire and police services. Michael, do you want to add to that, or?
Well, I think that's like with anything, we can always use more fire, more police. I mean, it's sort of speculative, we don't know, when I apologize, we just finished up our selectmen, we had an executive session, so I know Greg did the presentation, and I'm sure he stressed with everyone that we're mandated by law just to pick out an area that would be best to build the housing. We don't build the housing, we only have to zone the area. It would be up to private developers then to develop that area. I don't have a crystal ball, we don't know where interest rates are gonna be, what the economy's gonna be like. A lot of those things drive those types of developments. It's under the heading of like MBTA, but we really don't provide transportation service here. We're not like a city. If you're in the city of Boston, you have the trolleys, you have commuter lines, you have the Silver Line. you know, bus options for people to get to and from, so, it all depends. You know, there's a lot of ifs, but certainly we would have to take a look at, because, you know, as the population starts to increase, we would have to have, fire protection and police protection to make sure that we keep, everyone safe. And the same thing with schools, you know, if, you know, depending on the development down the road, if there are more children, you know, we have to make sure that we can provide the education. We have capacity in the schools that have to redistrict depending on where, you know, which schools are affected. That's how they make sure that each school is being utilized at that right. Anyone that had young kids, I know when my kids were in there, they had one redistricting, and then they went quite a while without having to redistrict kids. And then I remember, you know, maybe when I first became a town administrator, they had done redistricting, and that impacted families in Martinson and Ames Way districts, and I think the Southwood district.
And I did have a conversation with the school superintendent, and he said that we have 500 children or students less than when he became superintendent. So there is some capacity in the schools at the moment. Another thing to mention, if you look at the air photo, you can see a lot of the area is already developed. The MBTA zoning did not say we couldn't zone an area that was already developed. So we already have a lot of things in there. This would be a reuse of a property, which is an expensive item. We're not expecting a land rush and everything knocked down in that entire district all at once. I'm expecting 2 or 3 parcels, possibly in the, you know, in the near future, could be redeveloped. But a lot of these things are still viable uses. So the likelihood of this whole thing becoming 16 unit per acre, all 80 of it apartments in the near future is not something we're expecting, and that's part of the reason why when we were looking at areas, we were looking at this area in particular. Also, we had comments from people that said, well, why don't you put it up in Marshfield Hills? Because when you go back to that original map that we did, there was some white areas up in there. Those are single-family areas. They are not on the GATRA route. There are a number of reasons for why we chose the area that we picked to recommend to town meeting. So on our side, we view this as less immediate, overwhelming housing impacts with this particular area.
Have you done a traffic study? Have you done a traffic study?
There has not been a traffic study. When's the last one we had? It was after Roach Brothers.
Wasn't there when Bud's went in?
Yeah, Mill Creek had traffic on
We did.
139.
No.
The entire.
Right, not the entire quarter. Way back when, I was on the planning board and we got Roach Brothers through, part of it was our town worked very hard. I believe they got the governor trapped on Enterprise Drive,
Yes,
and that's
he
how
could make
we,
the left.
and that's how we got the lane added to 139, but at the time, the state mass highway was very clear to us. Don't expect us to come back and help you. You gotta take care of your own problems from now on 139. So we are gonna have to adjust the 2 traffic signals. We have an additional traffic signal coming in at School Street in the near future. On our side, on the planning board side, we always look at the travel time for people coming in and out of town as the primary. We don't want the secondary roads like Enterprise Drive and stuff eating into making the travel time in and out of town longer. So like on Enterprise Drive, we would need a second turning lane in order to shorten that, not have a longer red light on the main 139 versus the Enterprise Drive. The one at Proprietors is also going to need some work in order to handle the future traffic just from the 40Bs. We do have an area that we've kind of designated that kind of makes sense for where we could have a GATRA turnoff, because right now the GATRA bus along 139 has to stop in a travel lane, which is not a good idea. We need to get them off the travel lanes to pick up people in both directions safely. Do you have another one, or do I go to Nancy? Because
No, you can
Nancy
go to-
raised her hand. Nancy?
You answered my MBTA question, but I have a question about the accessory apartments. It's still gonna be one per parcel?
Yes. It's, at the moment, it's still one per parcel.
Has there been any study done of traffic coming off of Furnace Street into 139?
No, there have not been any studies at traffic at 139 since the original Modera and the Mill Creek update.
The reason why I ask that is you're coming down Furnace Street heading towards 139. There's a sign on the right-hand side with a go right arrow and a go left arrow. There's no go straight arrow there, which people going to Roach Brothers are trying to do. Is there any plan to widen that, so make it 3 lanes, so there'll be a left, a right, and a straight ahead turn? That's a problem, and it's gonna get worse.
That is a problem which we had brought up in the 40B hearings. I believe at one point, somebody said maybe we should just run over that sign right now to help the straight movement. We still need arrows at that particular light. That's one of the things that we need. The third lane, due to the curve and the grade difference at the Martinson, might be a little tough. We'd probably have a pretty high retaining wall there if we try to get that third lane. Again, that's something that we're gonna have to look at when we get into. One of the things that we've been doing is, as part of the Enterprise Park Drive, we had a traffic study and we have traffic impact funds that are coming in. So VRT, which is one of the developers, et cetera, all the different businesses, not the original Modera, but the second one, the Board of Appeals did put in as a condition that they had to pay towards that traffic mitigation fund. That traffic mitigation money is for those 2 intersections, to try to do improvements to those intersections.
And that includes Furnace Street as well?
Well, that's Proprietors Drive, Furnace Street, 139, and Enterprise Drive and 139.
So they will be, I'm assuming, widening, doing something to make that.
We're gonna have to figure out the best way of, yes, addressing that, but we definitely need the arrows at Proprietors. I have tried to take a left, and we've had, through movements and people trying to take lefts, and you also had, that's a long crosswalk as well. For
That's
the,
why, if I may, Greg,
Yep.
remind people, we have that sign, no right turn.
That was
and
added.
It's up on the pole so people can see it as you're coming down Furnace, because the kids, and anyone that's at that intersection between 2 and 3, it's crazy with the kids that are trying to cross that. Sometimes the kids don't wait, and they try running across before the light changes. But there's a no right-hand turn sign that lights up.
Not always. It's not always visible.
Not on the weekends, only Monday through Friday.
oh, I didn't know there was a time.
Yeah.
Well, they have to push the button.
That's push the button.
I'm a little concerned about the future. I know you said that we don't anticipate any developers coming in and doing anything with that parcel. But if they do, it looks like it's all of Fox Run and all of Castle Green. So if one foreign investor company were to come in and develop all that, I mean, the Fox Run apartments are pretty old. It would displace a lot of people at once.
So, on that point, my understanding is only one of the, all the condos and apartments that are on there, only Fox Run is still under the single ownership or corporation. The rest of them have condoized and have multiple individuals, which make it much harder for somebody to come in and redevelop because they gotta buy all the units. So again, to me, you have, Greg ran it, DJ Sullivan and stuff. Also, you gotta think, you need kind of squares versus, so there's gonna have to be some merging of lots and stuff to make this work. So I would possibly, that area could go. I know a number of people have called us about Quirk. I have had the Quirk's attorney and had a long conversation with him They are very happy with Marshfield, they're doing very well here. They have no intention of moving at the moment. But that, again, would be a site that a developer would look at as, oh, this is a easier site. One thing about the quirk is the whole back end of that site has a conservation restriction on it because it's in the Water Resource Protection District and stuff. So that, and when the developers call, I do explain that to them. So again, that kind of lessens that likelihood. We then, on the far side, you have some restaurants and some businesses and stuff like that. Yes, if they have 30,000 square feet, they could come in, but that's, depending on their lot size, that will limit the number of units and stuff, unless they acquire multiple properties.
Correct.
Yes.
So in this entire hatched area, I know the Quirk has the conservation restriction. There's also, isn't there also one over towards the back?
Oh, up in here?
Yeah, so so when you hatched it out, because they were conservation restrictions, that's why we're having this laddered approach, is that correct?
No, but that's a good point.
I remember having a conversation, but I don't remember
So the
what it was.
B2 zone actually kind of goes like this.
Oh, that,
But the MBTA requirements from the state want complete lots. So that's why there's the
Okay.
jigsaw
okay,
puzzle type of approach.
thanks.
No, that's okay, because this time I did not explain it because I cut the first
I
part
just
down a
remember
little.
trying to get my head around
Can you share with us some of the other sites that fell second and third place to this site here? Was there any other sites that were in contention, such as along the Esplanade and Brant Rock or anything like that?
The Brant Rock was never in the final contention type of thing, because one of the requirements is that you have to have a minimum area of 50 acres, which was part of the reason why all the other parcels and stuff fell out. So we had looked at the Marinus Hill area
Yeah.
and stuff, and it just, that part of 139 actually is even worse because we have 4 lanes, but we don't have a center turning lane. Adding a bunch of units where we already have a 40B, which is why we did not look on the south side in the industrial or the PMUD where we already have several 40Bs, which kind of goes back to the trying to not to overload one area of town. So where the industrial area already has 2 40Bs and 500 units, and the one over here by the Ace Hardware store and stuff already has Marina Hill, we did not want to put on top of additional units.
We couldn't put a light there.
And we couldn't put an additional light there because it's too close to the original lights.
What about further downtown? Was there discussion in downtown?
Again, we could not come up with 50 acres that was not having excluded and sensitive lands for multiple reasons. The reason go ahead.
It needs to be contiguous, and when you have big parts of big marsh in the middle of it, then it's not contiguous, so that's where some of the problems come when you start moving down.
Got it.
Because we got the neck, the Marshfield neck, as we go out towards the ocean.
I thought that Duxbury has divvied theirs up.
You can divvy it up, but you still need to have one that's at least 50 acres. So some towns did divide it, but they have one larger one and then smaller satellite ones sometimes to just do more. But you still need the one main one.
Does that mean the main one has to be a minimum of 50? The main one does.
Yeah. As I said, you don't have to have every question right now. You can contact us. Our emails for all of Town Hall, and this is a secret, our first initial, our last name, townofmarshfield, one word, .org.
It's not a secret.
Shh.
Question, this has to go through town, meeting to pass, is that
Yep,
correct?
so it has a planning board public hearing. It's discussed and voted on by the advisory board. It's discussed and voted on by the select board. So there are some additional steps, which the reason we were I wanted to have this last month, but it took a while for me to get these written and double checked. So we do have some time before the planning board hearing. And that gives us the ability, once we get past the planning board hearing, we're kind of locked in. And based on previous town experiences, having floor amendments sometimes can have unintended results. So we're, on the planning board side, we're gonna be reluctant to try to tinker with something on town meeting floor. So once we get past that planning board hearing, we're kind of locked in on language.
Is there a set date for that?
It's
Sorry.
sometime in March. We haven't picked the date yet, but it's usually 2 meetings a month, so it would probably be, I'm hoping early March, because we also have to have our meeting prior, X amount of days prior to town meeting, et cetera.
That be in person?
That, at the moment, that is still Zoom. I don't know if they're gonna extend the law or not yet. We'll find out.
We could hold it in person.
We could hold a public, in person, yes, which would be first time for the board in a while.
Hypothetical situation, assuming everything goes the way you're hoping it goes before the town meeting approved, goes to the state accepted. That doesn't mean that necessarily because it's a plan there, it has to be developed, does it?
Correct.
In other words, it could be left alone as it is, the state doesn't have a.
We just have to zone it.
Yes, I mean, no one's gonna use that unless it's an economic viable project.
Well, that, my point is because it's available and we've met the state requirements, doesn't mean it has to be developed, but only that it could be developed. Am I correct?
Yes. Did you-
I was gonna say, it's all privately held land, so only if a developer can come in and make it worth their while would, I mean, somebody's gotta be willing to sell it first. It might not be viable for a developer.
But, well, my concern was if it's not developed, is the state gonna say, oh, wait a minute, this is not something it's,
At the moment, the answer is no. But remember this, our state guidelines, and the state could, in the future, make changes to those guidelines. So I can't promise you that we'll never have to worry about this. You know, the state could come in and make additional changes.
Is our next deadline with the state this December 31st, 24 date of having this enacted in our bylaws?
Yes. So that's why I'm trying to make sure we have 2 town meetings in case we need to, something we didn't think of and town meeting says, hell no, we don't want to do this type of thing. Gives us an opportunity to make corrections.
With respect to the previous requests, we're in compliance with the state with their timing of getting the plan submitted and all of what else was necessary, so that we're not in the newspaper again.
Well, we are in compliance.
Okay.
We were delayed in getting our action plan, thank you, action plan in because we wanted to have 2 public meetings in person prior to doing that. So we wanted to make sure that the residents of the town had fair warning that this is something that's coming up and that they needed to be aware of. Now remember, at the moment, the catch on the state side is discretionary funds. Again, in the future, that might change. But at the moment, it's discretionary funds is what they're using as the,
And that clock starts at 1/1/25, 24.
yes, yeah. So at the moment, we could apply for any of those state grants because we are in compliance. Because we did come up with an action plan, we have drafted language, we are intending at the moment to go to town meeting with it.
That's what I was asking. Thank you.
Accessory dwelling, the detached version, other than having 2 bedrooms, is there a percentage or square footage of that?
Yes, So at the moment, we have, it's 40%, the old language, but we've added, or a maximum of 800 feet.
On the
So,
detached.
It's the same size.
It's the same size either, okay.
right,
All right, so if you've got this massive barn,
right.
also, did you have any consideration on, the fee seems a little onerous. I thought so.
Okay.
Have you considered anything similar to abatements? Maybe, you know, if, I'm trying to think of some of the use taxes or something that a senior can apply for. I'm just imagining that somebody who's gonna go for this, is looking to do this, is, you know, looking to do this financially. Try to bring the family together, try to take care of their parents. And I just think, you know, that fee seems, so you're gonna have a $700 fee, you've got engineering, it's gonna get expensive, and
Well, you're gonna need a site plan, yes, so.
you know, there's gonna be additional tax revenue built on the assessment of the dwelling. So I don't know if you've thought about making that a little bit more, you know, a little, I think $700 seems pretty high. I don't know what that is in comparison to other fees. I'm trying to think what Situate does. For some reason, that number seems high, and
So we'll look at the other towns to see what their fees are. Typically, the fee language isn't in the zoning bylaw, but I was trying to simplify it and put it all in one place, which is why I put it in there. Those numbers on our side aren't that skewed. $200 for an application fee and, you know, the $500 for,
Yeah, so it'd be one or the other, it's not both.
it's one or the other.
It's 200 for the site plan and 500 for the special permit, so you'd only be
Excuse me.
doing one.
thanks. Okay, any other questions? Going once?
I think you kind of already answered it about the discretionary funds. I wasn't sure if there was anything else from the state that they may have indicated to you about what happens if and when it doesn't pass.
Well, I know that several towns have been threatened with lawsuits by a housing group versus the state per se. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, or?
You know, right now they want us, I mean, the state, so I go to these webinars, so the state wants to see what each city and town comes up with. They're given that challenge, and they've been pretty good right now, because they're not saying that you have to build, you just have to zone. But I think that everyone in this room is, you know, very knowledgeable, and you know that if you zone it, you know, maybe in a few years, they may say, okay, well, now you're gonna have to develop a third of it, or half of it. The problem is, it's as the person up back mentioned, it's all privately held, so it's not the town developing this area. This is private investment dollars of people who would be investing in those areas, so it's really up to the private sector that that's something that they see viable. And, you know, a developer's not gonna take on a project unless it's more than economically feasible. There has to be a fairly decent profit margin.
Last one.
I apologize, I came in late, and I think you were discussing at the time, something about a minimum amount of time, as far as like a month or something, residency.
Oh, for the accessory apartment, yes.
Doesn't that lend itself to like having an Airbnb where you've got people renting it out for a couple of weeks and then another?
It is supposed to try to discourage that by a month versus weekly. So we have a lot of rentals weekly. And that's what we're trying to avoid, so it's less of an Airbnb situation.
Why not go with 6 months as opposed to 1?
Again, that's something the planning board can consider. I think when we get into the 6 month, that we're gonna get pushed back the other way. So it may be someplace in between. Okay, thanks, everybody, and remember, you can email us. We will have the notice out for the zoning change, the public hearing for the planning board, public hearings on that, but it will be sometime in early March.